that you enjoyed the experiences I write about here, even though not everyone believes me. As I mentioned in another post, my goal is not to convince you. I just want to get everything off my chest without my boss finding out everything. Similar to my last post, I wanted to address your comments first and answer them. PM5266. You said that you're also a caregiver and shared one of your own experiences. Something similar has happened to me more than once as well. It seems like the nursing home where I worked is constantly visited by deceased residents. What frustrates me the most is that my colleagues don't seem to notice or simply don't care about it. Andreas_MU4SU wanted to know what I did during the 4 weeks I had off. Well, I think I made good use of my time. My wife and I worked on our family planning, and I finally got round to playing The Last of Us on the PC. In the last 2 weeks, we took a short vacation. Since my wife is not from Germany, we took the opportunity to spontaneously visit her parents in England. A week in London did us both a lot of good, and I would like to repeat it in the near future. Although I have to say that English cuisine seems a little bit bland to me, because I usually season my food quite well. Strangely enough, the only thing I couldn't eat over there because of too much seasoning was fish and chips. What they call mayonnaise there has so much vinegar in it that it made my mouth pucker. But why am I even complaining? My wife and her parents feel the same way about my cooking skills. Every time I cooked for them so far, they've pointed out that I season the dishes too strongly or that the meat is overcooked. That's perfectly fine. It's just a cultural and taste difference. My wife and I enjoy my cooking, and that's what matters. Now that we've settled that, I'd like to tell you a little story that happened when I was still in training. It was my first hint that my nursing home is not quite normal. Some of you may wonder how I can talk about other nursing homes in other posts. If I did my training here, the explanation is relatively simple. I didn't just enter nursing and started training immediately. Instead, I worked as an assistant in nursing for almost 16 years before I decided to do the 3-year training. During those years, I worked in different nursing homes, and maybe I'll share a few things from those experiences too. But for now, I want to focus on my current workplace. It was in my 2nd year of training. As some of you may know, that's the point where apprentices are given more responsibility, but are still treated like rookies by some. So basically, it's like that state between being awake and asleep that you sometimes experience in the mornings. Some colleagues will treat you almost like an experienced nurse, while others still believe you have no idea how to deal with dementia patients. That always frustrated me. I mean, what's up with that? You trust me to stand in the nurse's office and spend 3 hours preparing medication for the entire unit without supervision, but when it comes to placing a subconscious infusion or catheter, suddenly I'm not qualified. That doesn't make sense in my opinion. Okay, enough ranting. Anyways, it was a pretty normal day at work. Justine, my mentor, had just given me the task of reviewing and evaluating the care plans of a few patients. For those of you who don't know what that is, or what it means, here's a brief explanation. The care plan is a document for the care of a patient/resident that contains information about the patient can do, where they need assistance, what personal items they have brought from home, etc. It also includes contact information for relatives, therapy goals, primary care, physicians. And to evaluate the care plan simply means that someone familiar with the patient reads through it and checks if it's still up to date. The care plan serves 2 main purposes. First, it provides transparency about the care we provide, and second, it allows any staff member who's not familiar with the patient to read through it and know how to care for them. It's essentially a tool for standardized care and quality assurance. I know, a student in their 2nd year probably shouldn't have been doing this, but she said that due to my experience, I shouldn't have a problem with. While she was right about that, it was also clear to me that she gave me this task because she simply didn't want to do it herself. Justine preferred to spend her time playing the flute, if you catch my drift, in one of the storage rooms. One of the care plans I evaluated that day was for Miss Hildegard Kurtz. She was considered insufferable unit a perception that I couldn't fully agree with. If anything, Miss Kurtz was just very particular and wanted everything to be done correctly. Since I was one of the very few who understood this, I was one of only 2 male nurse staff members allowed to assist with her bathing, and even among the female staff, only a handful were allowed to approach her. Some of the entries in her care plan were outdated, and I wrote changes on post-it notes so that Justine could enter them into the computer once she was done with her flute duet. Although I was allowed to perform the evaluation, my user account was not yet authorized to make changes. Just as I was about to write another change, the bell rang from Mrs. Kurtz's room. I looked at the clock and saw that it was almost 4 p.m., the time she wanted to be taken to the toilet. Since I was alone in the unit, with Justine, Marcus, and Alex all pursuing their musical hobbies at the moment, I put away the care plans, locked the office, and made my way to Miss Kurtz. Everything was as usual. She was sitting in her electric wheelchair, as always, waiting outside the bathroom. I put on my gloves and did what I had come for. Nothing out of the ordinary. However, when I looked out of her window, I saw a young man, maybe his mid-20s, walking back and forth on the sidewalk in front of the care home, repeatedly checking his watch, shaking his head. I returned to the office to continue my tasks, waiting for Miss Kurtz to ring the bell again to let me know when she was done. Several hours passed, and I completed my tasks before Justine and the 2 others returned. They always took their time with their choir rehearsals. During this time, I had looked out of the office window a few times. I don't know why, but the young man I had seen from Miss Kurtz's room was still there every time. He seemed to be getting more and more nervous, constantly checking a pocket watch that he wore on a chain. I decided to keep an eye on the situation. His behavior seemed very strange to me. Just to be sure, I mentioned it to Justine when she finally returned, but she told me to mind my own business, and that what happens outside the care home was none of my concern. It didn't take long to get all the residents to bed after dinner. Now that the 4 of us were working again, the 20 residents were no problem and we could soon end our shift. Believe me, I was glad when this day was finally over and I could go home. On my way to the car, I saw the young man again. He was still pacing back and forth on the sidewalk, repeatedly looking at his pocket watch. I couldn't help myself. My curiosity was too strong.
"Excuse me, can I help you?"
I asked him, and he stopped in surprise. The moment he looked at me as if I'd grown a second head, but he smiled, adjusted his suit, and put his watch back in his vest.
No, everything's fine, young man. I just waiting for someone. I haven't seen in a long time, and I'm a bit nervous. Maybe I came a bit too early, but I didn't want to be late.
He replied, and I was satisfied with that. I mean, who hasn't experienced something like that? When I showed up for duty the next day, I saw a hearse parked outside. Someone had passed away. During the handover, I learned that Miss Kurtz had suffered her 5th stroke that night and succumbed to it. As an apprentice, I was assigned the task of clearing out her room with her family and packing her belongings into the boxes. If I'm completely honest, I really didn't want to do it, but I also didn't want to get into trouble again. After all, my time in this living area was almost over, and Justine was responsible for writing up my evaluation. So I did as instructed and started clearing out Miss Kurtz's room with her children. I was in the process of wrapping her collection of porcelain figures in paper and carefully placing them in a box when her son pulled out a photo album one of the cabinets. His sister joined him as she flipped through it.
"Look, this was Mom and Dad at their wedding. Mark, do you want to see it too?"
Her daughter, Anna Marie, asked me. She knew her mother had liked me, and although she called me by my first name, she refused to use the do informal you from me.
"Sure,"
I said, putting the figurine I just wrapped back on the shelf and looking at Miss Kurtz's wedding photo. It's a good thing I put the figurine back, because the same young man I had spoken to last night in front of the care home was smiling at me from the photo.